He thought he was signing an $80 million deal, but the waitress knew it was his execution. Alexander Bellini sat at the head of the table with a gold pen in his hand, surrounded by men pretending to be wine importers while hiding guns, knives, and a detonator. The contract looked legitimate. The vineyard papers were signed, and everyone in the room was waiting for him to lower his guard. Once Bellini moved into the new warehouse, explosives would level the port and Sinaloa would take the eastern seaboard. One whisper from a waitress changed everything. Alexander put down the pen, called off the signing, and turned a private dinner into a cartel takedown. We begin in the heavy silence of Vittorio's dining room, where every polished surface seems to press down on Lucia Grant. She moves through the room like a shadow, trained by years of service to be present without being noticed. Men like the ones at that table prefer it that way. They want quiet hands, lowered eyes, and no questions. Then Lucia sees Alexander Bellini. He does not need to raise his voice or perform for anyone. He simply sits there, still and cold, as if the room has already accepted that he owns it. Bellini wears a charcoal suit cut like armor, the kind of expensive shield men use when they want the world to believe nothing can touch them. His posture is rigid, almost carved from stone. Around him, men discuss millions of dollars as if they are ordering dessert. Lucia refills their glasses with careful, practiced movements, keeping her thoughts buried behind a waitress's polite expression. For 3 years, she has watched men like this, and believed their money protected them from ordinary chaos. Tonight, she is about to learn how wrong that belief was. Bellini asks for a legal review, his suspicion sharp enough to cut through the room. Lucia begins clearing plates, but then she hears something that stops her cold. 2 men are whispering in Sicilian, the old dialect her grandmother Carmela taught her in Queens. At first, the sound almost feels familiar. Then the meaning lands. The nation at the port after the papers are signed. Lucia's fingers tighten around a plate. The language of her childhood has just become a warning no one else in the room can hear. Fear hits Lucia so hard she nearly forgets how to breathe. Her heart pounds, her hands go cold, but her face stays calm, because that is what work has taught her to do. Stack the plates, lower your eyes, do not draw attention. The men whisper that the cartel will kill Bellini and take control from Baltimore to Boston. They mention one name softly, like saying it too loud might bring him into the room: Salazar. The signing is not a business deal. It is a trap. If Bellini signs, he dies later. If he refuses, he dies here. The guards look relaxed, too used to danger to recognize it when it is standing beside them. Lucia has a choice, and every part of her wants to choose survival. She could stay silent. She could walk away, finish her shift, pretend she understood nothing. But Carmela's voice rises in her memory, firm and impossible to ignore. Sometimes, her grandmother once said, "A stranger is the only reason someone lives through the night." Lucia picks up the wine bottle. Her legs feel weak, but she keeps moving toward Bellini, crossing a line she can never uncross. Her hands tremble as she reaches Bellini's side. When their eyes meet, he finally sees her, not as part of the service, but as a person standing too close with too much fear in her face. Lucia leans in and speaks in fluent Sicilian, barely louder than a breath. "Do not sign. They are going to kill you. The port is wired." Bellini's jaw tightens. His pen stops above the paper. For 1 second, the entire conspiracy hangs on that whisper. Lucia does not know if he believes her. Then his eyes move to the men across the table. For 3 long seconds, Bellini does nothing. Then the businessman disappears, and something colder takes his place. He sets the pen down and says the signing will be postponed until a full audit is complete. His voice stays calm, but every man at the table feels the shift. One of the conspirators reaches toward his jacket. Bellini does not flinch. He only says one name, Joseph. That single word changes the room. The man with the hidden weapon realizes too late that Bellini was never the easiest target in the room. Joseph moves before anyone else fully understands what is happening. The first man hits the floor hard. Chairs scrape backward. A glass shatters. The room erupts. But Bellini remains seated, watching with the stillness of a man who has survived worse nights than this. Within seconds, the conspirators are restrained. Weapons and digital detonators are laid across the mahogany table like ugly proof. One phone keeps buzzing beside the evidence. A name appears on the screen, only a black serpent icon coiled around a silver cross. Lucia struggles to breathe as the weight of what she has done catches up with her. Bellini approaches with controlled, dangerous quiet. In the Palermo dialect of his ancestors, he asks who she is. Lucia tells him about Carmela, about the language, about the men planning to bomb his port. She expects suspicion, maybe anger. Instead, he listens. Something begins there, not romance, not trust, not safety, but a connection born in the second between warning and disaster. Lucia has spoken the truth in a room built on silence, and there is no way back to her old life now. The ambush had been designed to cut the head off Bellini's empire in one clean strike. Instead, Bellini stands alive, studying Lucia as if he is trying to understand every hidden part of her. He tells her she could have stayed silent. Lucia admits it, but says she could not watch him die. That answer changes something in his face. He orders Joseph to secure the port warehouse, then turns back to the bound men who betrayed him. They shout, threaten, and bleed onto the carpet. Bellini only looks at them, as if their fate has already been decided. Bellini shows no panic, not even when the captives curse his name. His voice stays almost conversational, as he tells them they will have plenty of time to think about their mistakes. He instructs Joseph to hand them over to the right police contacts, men who know which evidence to find and which charges to press. Lucia watches in a numb daze. 10 minutes earlier, her worries were rent, exhaustion, and another late shift. Now she is a witness in a criminal war. When Bellini tells her to stay, she obeys because the room has already taken her choices away. Conspirators keep protesting, but their words mean nothing beside the weapons, detonators, and proof on the table. Bellini gives quiet orders, and somewhere beyond the restaurant, his network begins to move. Joseph confirms that 3 major explosive devices have been found at the port. Bellini's jaw tightens for only a second, but Lucia sees it. He looks at her, and for one brief moment, gratitude cuts through the coldness between them. Her small warning has stopped a massacre. Before Lucia can process that, Bellini asks one question. Who else knows you heard them? That is where the first dangerous thread between Lucia and Alexander begins. Fear still shakes her, but adrenaline has turned everything sharp and unreal. Alexander understands danger with the instincts of a man who has lived inside it for years. He moves her away from the others, controls the space, and tells her what she did was not foolish. It was brave. Lucia almost laughs because she does not feel brave. She feels terrified. But he looks at her as if he sees something valuable, something rare. For a woman used to being overlooked, that kind of attention is almost as frightening as the threat itself. His questions are direct. Who taught her Sicilian? Who is Carmela? Why did she risk herself for him? Lucia touches the gold earrings her grandmother left behind. The only part of Carmela she still carries every day. She says she would not have been able to live with herself if she stayed silent. Alexander watches her carefully. In his world, no one acts without a reason, and no one gives anything for free. Lucia's answer does not fit the rules he knows. For a moment, his face softens just enough to prove there is still something human beneath the armor. Lucia tries to protect herself with denial. She wants to believe that once the night ends, she can go home, sleep a few hours, and return to the life she understands. Alexander destroys that illusion quickly. The cartel knows someone warned him. If they learn her name, she will not last a day. Lucia says she can take care of herself, but even she hears how thin the words sound. Alexander tells her the truth without softening it. You saved my life. Now I am the only reason they have not taken yours. I don't even know you, Lucia says, trying to hold the smallest boundary she still has. Alexander answers with calm certainty. No, but they know enough. By the time she returns to Astoria at 2 in the Bimuthiktunu, guard his have already searched her apartment. A black sedan waits outside like a shadow that followed her home. Lucia lies awake, replaying the Sicilian whispers, the shattered glass, the stillness in Alexander's eyes. When a sharp knock comes at 7:45 the next morning, panic rises before thought. Her old life has lasted exactly one more night. The men at her door are polite, but their message is not a request. Mr. Bellini requests your presence. The sentence sounds formal enough to pass as courtesy, yet Lucia hears the order beneath it. She gets ready with shaking hands, caring less about how she looks than whether she will survive the day. They guide her into a tinted charcoal sedan. Outside, normal traffic moves through Queens as if nothing has happened. People drink coffee, honk at lights, cross streets with grocery bags. Lucia watches them through dark glass and feels as if she has already vanished from their world. The building they bring her to rises over Manhattan in glass and steel. Everything inside is designed to make a person feel small: cold marble floors, silent elevators, abstract art too expensive to be welcoming. As the elevator climbs 42 floors, Lucia feels herself being carried farther away from every ordinary rule she knows. She is led through a corridor into a corner suite, where Alexander stands with his back turned to the city. Even that seems deliberate. He does not turn right away. He makes people wait for his attention. Every object in Alexander's office says the same thing. Power lives here. The massive desk, the view, the expensive silence, all of it makes Lucia's life feel smaller by comparison. He wears a navy suit and speaks into the phone with flat precision, telling someone he does not care what it costs. Money to him is not a worry. It is a weapon. When he finally looks at Lucia, his eyes move over her plain clothes and tired face. And he gestures to the chair. Sit. No raised voice. No threat. Just power doing what it was built to do. Lucia tries to shrink the danger into something manageable. Maybe the men did not see her face. Maybe they will assume Bellini had another informant. Maybe this will pass, and says there is already a bounty on her head. Her fingers tighten against the leather chair. Captured hitmen have given up enough information to identify her. The cartel lost $80 million because the port attack failed. And Salazar does not forgive public embarrassment. Lucia did not mean to enter their war, but her name is now attached to their humiliation. With less than 24 hours before the threat closes in, Lucia begins bargaining with reality. She says she can leave New York, disappear, find somewhere cheap and far away. Alexander asks one word, where? It lands harder than a threat because he is right. She has no family, no hidden money. No one powerful enough to protect her. When she insists she can handle herself, he steps closer and lists what he has: safe houses, guards, passports, names that do not exist yet. Lucia hates how badly she needs what he is offering. Alexander tells her loyalty is rare enough to protect. He looks at Lucia, a waitress who spoke Sicilian, who could have stayed invisible and did not, and sees more than a witness. When he says, "I protect what is valuable," it affects her more than she wants to admit. For someone used to being ignored, being seen can feel dangerously close to being safe. Then he slides a folder across the desk. Inside is another option. A new identity. A clean escape to Italy. Protection. In his world. Can be arranged overnight. All it costs is the person she used to be. Inside the folder is Anna Russo, passport, bank card, and a complete paper life built while Lucia barely slept. The speed of it chills her. Alexander can erase and rebuild a person before sunrise. The offer tempts her, because it promises distance from the terror closing around her. But something in Lucia refuses. She has already lost too much control. She will not let powerful men decide that fear is enough reason to bury her name. She pushes the folder back across the desk. Her voice is quiet but steady. "My name is Lucia Grant. I worked for everything I have here," she tells him. The apartment, the job, the little money saved in envelopes. The life that never looked impressive to anyone but belonged entirely to her. Alexander studies her, and for a flicker of a second, respect breaks through his guarded face. Lucia challenges him to protect her in New York instead of sending her away, like evidence to be hidden. Then she speaks her grandmother's name, Carmela Rizzo, and the room feels less cold. Her roots are the one thing Alexander cannot buy, replace, or erase. Lucia tells him Carmela died 3 years earlier, a sudden heart attack at 71. As she speaks, her fingers find the earrings again, tracing the last physical link to the woman who raised her. Grief opens a door Alexander did not expect. For the first time, he reveals a piece of himself, roots in Palermo, a sister named Lauren kept safely distant in Boston. His isolation is not an accident. It is a wall built from fear and experience. They sit in the heavy quiet, not close, not trusting, but no longer complete strangers. 42 floors above Manhattan, the room feels sealed away from ordinary life. When Lucia asks what happens next, Alexander returns to strategy. She will be taken to a monitored safe house in Tribeca. Heavy security, no unnecessary movement, no calls without clearance. He gives her a card with his private number, a small object that feels both reassuring and terrifying. He does not pretend this is freedom. It is a cage, only safer than the grave waiting outside. Lucia takes the card because fear has made even a cage look like a choice. The safe house begins stripping away pieces of Lucia's old identity. One fabricated phone call ends her job. Cameras watch from corners. Guards rotate outside the door. Her life becomes survival behind reinforced glass. Then Alexander arrives with deli food in paper bags so ordinary it almost feels cruel. For a little while, the sterile apartment changes. Lucia talks about the life she once wanted, especially the linguistics degree she abandoned when Carmela got sick. Speaking the dream out loud hurts. It also reminds her she had one. Alexander asks what she would do if money were not a problem. Lucia almost laughs. People like her are not trained to answer questions like that. Still, she admits languages were always her refuge. Spanish, French, Sicilian. Pieces gathered from books, neighbors, songs, and careful listening. She calls it a hobby, because no school ever taught her to call it skill. Alexander hears something else. Usefulness, intelligence, a way of reading people that money cannot buy. And Lucia realizes she may have traded danger for a different kind of exposure. Being called brave unsettles her. In the narrow hallway, Alexander stands too close, and the danger of him becomes difficult to separate from the safety he provides. He is the man keeping enemies away, but he is also the reason she cannot leave. Shelter and prison wear the same face. Then he disappears for 7 days. Inside the bulletproof apartment, Lucia begins to fray. She stares at his business card, like it is the only solid thing in the room. A locked door can keep danger out. It can also make the person inside forget how to breathe. The safe house is beautiful, but the silence gnaws at her. Lucia creates rituals to stay sane. She reads until the words blur. She cooks meals she barely eats. She watches the street below and learns the guards' rotations. Their politeness starts to feel less like protection and more like captivity with better manners. On the 5th night, a delivery bag arrives with no driver on camera. Inside is only a burned match and a slip of paper with one line. Salazar hears everything. On the 7th morning, Alexander calls. His voice, calm and familiar, hits her harder than she expects. When he asks how she is, Lucia almost lies. Then she says the truth. Not well. She tells him about the note, and the silence on his end lasts too long. He says the building was supposed to be clean. That word, supposed, frightens her more than any threat. Alexander offers her a task before fear can swallow the room. Some Italian suppliers are coming in, and his translators understand the words but not the pride, the pauses, the insults hidden behind courtesy. Import Solutions is not a shadowy den. That makes it more unnerving. The lobby is sleek, bright, and respectable, filled with glass walls and quiet assistants who never look surprised. Alexander stands near the reception area in charcoal, completely at home in a world that makes Lucia feel underdressed and exposed. Yet when he gives her a brief, approving look, she steadies. He explains the 3 Tuscan delegates before they arrive. Proud men, traditional men. Men who hear disrespect even when it is politely dressed. Lucia nods. She understands rooms where power hides behind manners. The Tuscan brothers enter with polished smiles and guarded eyes. Lucia is introduced as someone who speaks Sicilian, the eldest, Antonio. Test her immediately in rapid Italian. Lucia answers in the regional dialect of her Palermo ancestors. The change in Antonio is small but real. His shoulders ease. His suspicion softens. She has reached him through something older than business. To Alexander, it looks almost like magic. To Lucia, it is simple. People listen differently when they feel their world has been understood. Lucia quickly becomes more than a translator. She explains Antonio's pauses, his idioms, the pride hidden inside his hesitation. When Alexander pushes too hard, she softens the language without weakening the deal. She changes conquest into partnership. A 5-year stalemate begins to loosen, because Antonio finally feels respected instead of cornered. Alexander watches her work, quiet and intent. Lucia notices, for the first time since the night at Vittorio's, she is not being useful because she is trapped. She is being useful because she is good. When Antonio thanks her, the words hit Lucia harder than she expects. After the meeting, Alexander praises her ability to read people. She tries to brush it off, but he does not let her shrink from it. Then he invites her to dinner at a quiet place in the West Village. Lucia knows the line between protector and captor is already too blurred. She also knows the thought of returning to the empty safe house makes her chest tighten, so she says yes. Loneliness can open a door that caution would have kept locked. The restaurant has no sign outside. Underground, it smells of aged wood, garlic, and warm bread. The elderly cook moves through the kitchen with the same fierce authority Carmela once carried. And for a second, Lucia is back in Queens, watching her grandmother stir sauce with one hand and scold her with the other. Comfort and grief arrive together. Alexander notices the shift in her face but does not press. That restraint matters. For once, he does not control the silence. He simply sits in it with her. Long before Alexander entered her life, Lucia had already been shaped by sacrifice. Her dream of studying linguistics disappeared when Carmela got sick and money ran out. She took work at Vittorio's, learned to survive long shifts, cruel customers, and men who mistook wealth for greatness. When she saved Alexander, she went against every instinct that told her to protect herself. She tells him she would make the same choice again. Alexander looks at her as if that answer hurts him. In his world, kindness always has a price. Lucia is the first person who has made him doubt that. Alexander does not understand it at first. His life has taught him to measure every action by cost, leverage, and consequence. Lucia's answer comes from another place entirely. If she had watched him die, she says, something in her would have died too. For one brief instant his armor cracks. He almost answers honestly. Then headlights sweep across the dark window outside. Joseph's voice cuts through Alexander's earpiece. 2 hostile vehicles have followed them from Midtown. The fragile warmth at the table vanishes. Alexander stands and the room turns dangerous again. Alexander changes instantly. The man across the dinner table is gone. In his place is someone cold, focused, and ready for violence. He shields Lucia with his body as Joseph moves them toward the rear exit. The chase tears through the city at brutal speed, Lucia gripping the seat as New York blurs into streaks of light. They lose the first sedan near Union Square, but the second driver slows beside them long enough for Lucia to see a silver cross hanging from the mirror. Alexander sees it too. His face goes still. Salazar's men. The safe house is compromised. That single sentence removes the last illusion Lucia had left. Alexander moves her to his fortified estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her pride resists the dependence, but her survival instinct is louder. In the dark car, when he takes her hand and promises she will be safe, she lets herself believe him, because the alternative is unbearable. Outside the windows, the city falls away. Before they reach the highway, Alexander orders Joseph to replace every guard from Tribeca. Lucia hears the anger under his calm and knows someone close has failed him. Over the next 3 weeks, the Greenwich estate becomes a carefully managed universe. It is beautiful, quiet, and controlled enough to calm her nervous system. There are no obvious guards, but hidden cameras remind her that freedom still has limits. From the window, she watches autumn leaves fall, while custom clothes appear in her room, and every physical need is met before she asks. The comfort is deliberate, the isolation is too. And each time he returns, Lucia looks first for blood on his cuffs. On the 4th morning, Alexander comes downstairs without his usual suit. The simple sweater and rolled sleeves make him look less untouchable, and Lucia notices despite herself. When she says she feels like an intruder, he calls her a guest, as if a softer word can change the locked gates outside. Then he gives her Roman contracts to translate. The work gives her a place at the table, and a reason to think about something other than fear. Purpose returns a piece of her dignity, but it also ties her more tightly to his world. A routine begins to form, but it never feels completely safe. Morning coffee, quiet conversations, sudden calls that make Alexander leave the room. In his study, Lucia translates dense contracts and spots hidden traps, coded threats, and power plays buried between polite phrases. When Alexander praises her, she credits Carmela. Her grandmother, she says, taught her that the loudest truth in a room is often the thing no one says directly. Alexander listens. He is starting to understand that Lucia's value is not accidental. She reads people because survival taught her to. The work exhausts Lucia, but it also sharpens her. One afternoon in the November garden, Alexander asks what her life might have been if they had never met. She defends the life he sees as small, counting coins, stretching every dollar, worrying over rent and shoes and late fees. To him, that sounds like survival. To her, it was freedom because the struggle belonged to her. Before he can answer, a guard's radio crackles with static from the south gate. Nothing is there when they check. That almost makes it worse. Little by little, Lucia understands that her safety is being maintained at the cost of her choices. Armed men control the perimeter. Phones are filtered. Movement is approved or denied before she asks. Finally, she confronts Alexander. What am I here? A guest or a prisoner? His answer is practical and cold. He says she is alive. To him, that should be enough. Before she can answer, the estate alarm flashes once, then dies. Joseph appears at the door with a pale face. One outer camera has gone black. Alexander does not think in terms of long futures. He thinks in threats, counters, and the next move needed to keep everyone breathing. But this time, even he looks unsettled. The camera outage lasts only 12 seconds, Yet 12 seconds is long enough to plant a bomb, mark a window, or test a weakness. When Lucia presses him, he admits he has no clear plan for what happens to her after the danger passes. That honesty deepens the helplessness around her. Then laughter suddenly echoes through the estate, bright and careless. Alexander's sister Lauren appears at the door. Lauren is small, barely 5'3", wearing a university sweatshirt and carrying a worn bag that looks completely wrong in Alexander's cold house. Her energy is warm, sharp, and unafraid. She teases her brother with the ease of someone who knew him before he became untouchable. When she sees Lucia, the mood changes. Alexander calls Lauren someone who ignores boundaries. Lauren only smiles and says boundaries are usually where the interesting secrets are kept. Her handshake is simple and human. In a house built on control, warmth feels almost rebellious. Lauren's presence disrupts the estate immediately. She sees Lucia as something that does not fit inside Alexander's carefully managed life. Lucia tries to hide behind professionalism, calling herself a translator and temporary consultant. Lauren does not believe it for a second. Even Alexander's warning glare cannot stop her curiosity. Over dinner, the house begins to feel less like a fortress and more like a home, if only for an hour. Alexander watches his sister and Lucia speak, caught between relief and fear. Real connection has entered his house, and he cannot control what it will expose. When Alexander leaves the room, Lauren's politeness drops. She tells Lucia this is not a normal business arrangement. Either Lucia is in mortal danger, or something deeply complicated is happening between her and Alexander. Lucia admits the threat because lying suddenly feels exhausting. Lauren understands more than expected. She knows her brother's greatest flaw. He believes control can solve anything. He protects people by building walls around them. But walls do not only keep enemies out. Sometimes they trap everyone inside, including the man who built them. Lucia tries to explain her presence as duty, debt, and circumstance, and anything that makes it sound less personal. Lauren does not accept the safe version. In Alexander's life, distance is the rule. If he has brought Lucia into his home, something has already changed. Lauren's warmth exposes what the estate lacks. Before leaving, she gives Lucia a warning disguised as kindness. Alexander is profoundly alone, and lonely men often mistake possession for protection. Lucia watches her go, unsettled. For the first time, she wonders whether Alexander's cage was built for her or for himself. After Lauren leaves, the estate returns to its old quiet, but Lucia hears it differently now. Alexander looks more tired than powerful. When she mentions his sister, he softens for a moment, then retreats behind logic. Secrecy keeps people safe, he says. Distance keeps enemies from finding leverage. Before Lucia can answer, Joseph arrives with news that cuts through the room. The Sinaloa cartel has changed strategy. Alexander's calm disappears, replaced by the commander, who knows danger like a native language. This time he tells Lucia to stay. Keeping her ignorant is no longer an option. Joseph explains that the cartel is moving against Alexander's business infrastructure across Jersey, Queens, and the Bronx. Their goal is simple: make Lucia too expensive to protect, turn one woman into a financial liability, force Alexander to choose between his empire and his conscience. Salazar has also sent a message through a burned-out warehouse in Newark. One silver cross nailed to the office door. No note needed. Joseph adds the detail quietly. The last man who ignored that sign was found alive, but never spoke again. Joseph thinks like a soldier. He asks whether one witness is worth the damage that may follow. Alexander rejects the question before it fully leaves the air, and weakness would invite collapse. Joseph warns that protecting Lucia could bring violence into the city. Alexander prepares to mobilize allies across the eastern seaboard anyway. Lucia stands very still as the truth settles over her. She has become the spark for something far larger than herself. Protection can look noble from the inside, but from another angle, it can become pride with a loaded gun. Lucia blames herself because survivors often do. Violent people make violent choices around her, yet she feels responsible for the wreckage. Alexander takes that blame from her as fiercely as he can. When she says she is not worth this much destruction, he steps close, takes her face in his hands, and makes her look at him. "You are not a liability," he says. "You are the only person in that room who had nothing to gain and still chose me." In a world where loyalty is usually bought, Lucia's choice has become something he refuses to sell. Something in Alexander opens then. He admits she is no longer only a witness. In his world, everyone wants money, influence, revenge, or safety. Lucia saved him before she had any reason to believe he would save her. That truth has unsettled him more than the cartel ever could. Their closeness becomes defiance against everything closing in around them. Lucia knows it is dangerous. She knows care can become another chain. But when he lowers his forehead to hers, the fear between them shifts into something harder to deny. Lucia calls it a mistake, but her hands hold on to him anyway. Outside, the cartel continues to move. Inside, their relationship changes under the cold light of winter. Shared meals last longer. Arguments cut deeper. The silence between them is no longer empty. One of the perimeter guards disappears during a midnight rotation and returns at dawn with no memory of 3 hours. On his palm, someone has drawn a tiny silver cross in black ink. Alexander doubles the watch. Lucia stops sleeping with the lights off. Winter narrows their world. The cold keeps them inside, and Alexander's work grows harsher by the day. By early December, Lucia hears him on calls, negotiating defenses in a voice stripped of emotion. He warns other factions that the cartel's intrusion threatens the balance of the region. When he hangs up, exhaustion shows in his face before he can hide it. Power looks glamorous from a distance. Up close, Lucia sees what it really is: maintenance, pressure, and constant vigilance. Everything Alexander owns demands to be held in place. Alliances in Alexander's world are rarely built on trust. Boston and Philadelphia agree to temporary cooperation, but every promise has a price: territory, revenue, concessions, future favors. Alexander accepts the losses because stopping the cartel matters more. Lucia stays close, her touch helping him steady himself while he admits how fragile the agreements are. These men do not come together because they believe in each other. They come together because, for one dangerous moment, their fears point in the same direction. Lucia begins learning faster than anyone expects. She moves beyond translation and starts decoding intercepted communications, finding patterns inside what sounds like noise. While Alexander handles negotiations, she studies recordings late into the night. Ordinary logistics hide strategic movements. Her ear catches differences between Mexican and Colombian accents. Then she hears Salazar himself for the first time. Soft voice, dry laugh, the faint tap of a ring against glass before every threat. Joseph tells her that tap is deliberate. Men have agreed to terrible things just to make it stop. Lucia maps the coordinates and finds a cluster of safe houses near the Newark docks. The geography of violence takes shape on the screen. When Alexander enters, she plays the audio for him, identifying a powerful Colombian figure moving north to expand territory. And Salazar's voice returns almost gentle, promising to cut the Bellini network one clean thread at a time. What she has found terrifies her, but it also changes her. She is no longer only the woman being hidden in guarded rooms. She has found a door into the enemy's plan. Lucia proposes infiltrating the meeting as a translator. Alexander reacts instantly, anger flashing through his control. The idea of sending her into that room is unbearable to him, but Lucia understands what he refuses to face. Hiding her forever will not make her safe. It will only make her smaller. She tells him the cartel needs a translator. With a neutral accent and no known connection to him, she can become that person. Alexander says no before she finishes. Lucia does not back down. "You wanted me alive," she says. "Now let me help end this." The argument is quiet but fierce. Alexander insists on trained operatives. Joseph points out the problem. Their last operative was recognized and killed almost immediately. Salazar is paranoid, suspicious, and known for testing people with harmless questions before giving the order to kill them. A wrong childhood memory, a wrong accent, 1 second of hesitation that is enough for him. Lucia offers something a professional soldier cannot: ordinariness. With a fabricated Argentine identity, she can enter as a translator and be dismissed as harmless. To break Alexander's resistance, Lucia points to the one thing he fears most: his own ranks may already be compromised. The room goes silent, and his usual methods are broken. Lucia is not just suggesting a reckless plan. She is offering an angle the cartel will not expect. Alexander stands motionless, fighting every instinct that tells him to lock her away and call it protection. Lucia knows what failure would mean. She also knows what hiding forever would do to her. In that quiet room, overprotection and self-determination collide. Lucia takes Alexander's hand and tells him he is not the enemy, but she needs him to trust her enough to let her choose. He looks at her for a long time, torn between fear and respect. In the end, he agrees, but not as her owner, as her partner. The FBI will coordinate. Surveillance will cover every angle. There will be an abort signal. If anything feels wrong, she leaves immediately. Then Alexander calls the team and says the final decision in the room will be Lucia's. When the call ends, Alexander's face is unreadable. The FBI has been chasing pieces of this cartel network for 18 months. Never enough to make the case stick. Need someone clean, someone outside the criminal ecosystem, to connect leadership directly to operations. Lucia was right, but the legal rules are merciless. Recordings must be clear. Statements must hold. Every move must survive in court. Joseph confirms limited protection measures, and Lucia feels two things at once: relief that the plan matters, and terror, because she is the one who must walk through the door. Alexander makes one thing clear: her life matters more than any case, any arrest, any victory. The next 5 days become a compressed training ground. Lucia's identity is taken apart and rebuilt as Anna Russo, a translator from Buenos Aires. They create agency records, travel history references, and enough detail to survive casual questions. She trains on exits, posture, breathing, silent signals, and how to keep panic from showing on her face. No one teaches her to be a hero. They teach her how to buy seconds, because seconds may be all she gets. She practices the rhythmic distress signal until her body can perform it without thought. Alexander watches from the edge of the room, silent with guilt he cannot hide. At night, they try to create small pockets of peace: dinner, coffee, a hand on the back of her chair. But at 2 a.m. on the 5th night, the illusion fails. Lucia finds him staring at surveillance photos of the Newark facility, memorizing exits he has already memorized. On one image, Salazar is circled in red, smiling at no one. Lucia touches Alexander's shoulder and reminds him this choice belongs to her. She repeats that it is her decision, though saying it does not make the cost lighter. Alexander admits he cannot bear the thought of her failing, not because of the mission, but because of what failure would do to her. Lucia tells him to trust the preparation, trust Joseph, trust the team. Then, after a long silence, she says the hardest part. "Trust me," Alexander answers that he does. This time, he proves it by closing the surveillance file and stepping away from the table. They hold each other until begins to turn the windows gray. Newark warehouse waits beneath a disguise of cracked pavement, rusted siding, and industrial neglect. 3 blocks away, Lucia sits in an unmarked vehicle. Her appearance has been made forgettable. Plain slacks, neat bun, low-threat posture. Just another contract translator trying to finish a job. Joseph checks her audio feed one final time. She adjusts the necklace, hiding a sensitive microphone. Inside her portfolio rests the storage device that must reach the cartel system. Her hands look steady in her lap. Only she can feel how badly they want to shake. Joseph gives the final warning. She is to deploy the device, only when completely unobserved. Lucia looks at her reflection in the dark window and sees Anna Russo looking back. Training can prepare the body, but it cannot erase the reality of walking into a room without mercy. Joseph tells her tactical units are nearby, and Alexander is monitoring her biometric data. And Joseph adds, he said, "If you call it off, we pull out. No questions." Lucia breathes once slowly. For the first time, protection feels like it still belongs to her. At exactly 2 o'clock, Lucia tells Joseph she is ready and steps out of the vehicle. Marco Vega waits near the side entrance. A man in his 30s with the watchful look of someone used to small power. He studies her closely. When he asks who she is, Lucia answers in a steady, neutral voice. "Anna Russo. Translation services." He leads her down a dark hallway that smells of old machinery and damp concrete. When he tests her Spanish, she answers without hesitation. She is afraid, but her mind is performing. The room she enters is built to unsettle the senses. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. The surfaces are sterile. Cameras sit in the corners like unblinking insects. Marco's tension tells Lucia that even insiders are afraid here. At the far end of the table sits Salazar, unnaturally still, his hair silver at the temples, a silver cross ring tapping once against his glass. His smile is faint and empty. Lucia remembers Joseph's warning about men who never spoke again. Her body wants to run. Her face gives him nothing. When Lucia takes her seat, isolation closes around her. Salazar watches as if he is trying to hear her heartbeat. Beside him sits Rafael Cortez, dressed like a businessman with clean cuffs and dead eyes. He shakes her hand politely, and that politeness is what makes him worse. Salazar studies Lucia's necklace, then asks in gentle Spanish whether Buenos Aires still smells of rain in March. It is a test casual enough to kill her if she answers wrong. Lucia opens her notebook and smiles faintly, only near the old streets. For 40 minutes, Lucia becomes a channel for other people's ruin. She translates figures tied to shipments, addiction, violence, and money. In a voice so flat it almost frightens her, illegal product is discussed with the same dull practicality as office supplies. Salazar never raises his voice. He only taps the silver ring whenever someone disappoints him, and every man at the table notices. The recorder captures everything. Beneath the appearance of obedience, she is quietly building the archive that may bring them down. The financial presentation creates a brief distraction. One of the Colombian men leaves the room to answer a call, and the balance shifts just enough to create an opening. Lucia's panic has to become movement-controlled and exact. Her hand slides toward the portfolio where the storage device waits. Her pulse races so hard she hears it in her ears. But her body stays calm because one visible mistake could kill her. Then she drops her pen. It rolls beneath the table. Salazar's eyes flick toward it, then away. The cartel men barely notice her, because men who feel untouchable often overlook the person they have already dismissed. As Lucia bends to retrieve the pen, she connects the storage device to the port. 45 seconds. That is all she has. The progress light blinks once, then again. Rafael is arguing over percentages. Salazar is watching Hector, not her. The device finishes. Lucia removes it, lifts the pen, and returns to her seat as if nothing has happened. Her hands are steady. Her throat feels full of glass. When Diego returns, the room tightens again. Lucia organizes her papers while hiding the device back inside the portfolio. The altered data is now embedded, designed to trigger paranoia between the syndicate and the Colombians. When Rafael opens the file, his own suspicion does the rest. He does not question the information, because it confirms fears he already carries. That is the easiest lie to believe, the one that sounds like something you were already afraid of. Lucia keeps her eyes down as the first crack spreads across the table. Hector tries to defend his numbers, not yet understanding that the data now shows a $600,000 discrepancy. Lucia watches silently as confusion turns sharp. The difference between 3.2 million and 3.8 million is too clean to explain away. Hector's history of greed makes the accusation easy to accept. Rafael's face hardens. Salazar says nothing, which is worse. His ring taps once. The whole table hears it. In their world, that sound means someone is about to pay. The accusation turns poisonous. Rafael challenges Hector in a low voice, and his denial grows frantic. But the numbers on the screen have already become truth to the others. Salazar finally speaks, calm and almost bored. Someone is lying. Someone in the room wants to be the weakest answer to that sentence. Lucia feels the air change. Men shift in their chairs. Hands move closer to jackets. She sends the rhythmic signal to Joseph's team, tapping it with barely visible pressure against her own wrist. The confrontation turns physical fast. Guns appear before Lucia can finish her next breath. She dives for cover, letting training take over where fear would have frozen her. A shot cracks through the room. Glass bursts. Someone shouts in Spanish. Salazar does not shout. He only smiles, as if violence has confirmed what he already expected. Outside, engines roar. The warehouse doors slam open. Law enforcement storms in with tactical precision, bringing order into a room already eating itself alive. Tactical officers flood the space, shouting commands as red laser sights sweep over the concrete. Joseph subdues Hector before he can reach the side exit, forcing him hard to the floor. Rafael drops his weapon only after 3 rifles aim at his chest. Salazar remains seated until an agent cuffs his hands behind his back. Pull him up. He looks directly at Lucia and says, almost kindly, "Translators always think words can save them." The shift is so sudden Lucia's mind can barely process it. Her body still does not believe she has survived. Once Lucia is pulled from the warehouse, the adrenaline drains out of her and leaves only exhaustion. Inside the transport vehicle, the immediate danger fades enough for her defenses to collapse. Then she sees Alexander. The control she held for hours breaks all at once, and she begins to cry. He does not tell her to stop. He only holds her, careful and fierce, as if any harder touch might shatter her. Being rescued is not the same as being whole. But for the first time that day, Lucia has somewhere safe to fall apart. In the aftermath, Alexander tells her the plan worked. The FBI has recordings, financial links, names, routes, and enough evidence to begin dismantling the cartel's local structure from the inside. What tied Lucia and Alexander together was never simple romance, and it was not blind dependence. It was something forged under threat, tested by fear, and changed by choice. The cartel thought it could turn Lucia into leverage. Instead, she became the fracture that exposed them. Still, Salazar's last words remain in her mind long after the cuffs close. The criminal network begins to dissolve under federal indictments. When pressure comes, loyalty vanishes quickly. Men who once spoke of power and allegiance rush to save themselves. The local cartel structure breaks apart, not in one dramatic explosion, but through papers, warrants, seized accounts, and frightened confessions. Salazar stays silent through every interrogation, smiling at questions as if he has already hidden something no one has found. In the calm that follows, Lucia realizes safety is not the same as certainty. Fear dragged her into Alexander's world. Choice will decide whether she stays. Months later, the woman once hidden behind the name Anna Russo stands before a mirror in Greenwich and dissolved the false identity that protected her. Now she is Lucia again, dressed in amber gold, breathing like someone who has survived more than anyone in the room will ever know. Her posture is different. She is no longer a cornered woman waiting for orders. She is rebuilding herself deliberately, piece by piece. Trauma damaged her life. It did not get to own the rest of it. Alexander enters in a custom navy suit, and Lucia feels a familiar rise of nerves. Not danger this time, but the weight of the milestone ahead. He does not coddle her. He tells her she earned this. When she adjusts his tie and tries to deflect the credit, she recognizes the old habit of making herself smaller. But she has already fought that habit. She demanded a fair salary and the title of director. She made the position real. Alexander gave her an opportunity, but Lucia made sure it came with her name, her terms, and her dignity. In 90 days, Lucia secures major contracts across 3 countries. Her work becomes a disciplined answer to the fear that once threatened to consume her. She refuses to become dependent on Alexander, because dependence can be another beautiful cage. On sleepless nights, she lists debts, fears, obligations, and plans until panic turns into strategy. She demands autonomy, and Alexander respects it instead of playing savior. That matters. Their relationship survives because Bordes learns that between protecting her and owning her. Lucia's days settle into the legitimate side of the Bellini enterprise, coordinating shipments through Italy, Spain, and Argentina. Her ability to understand culture, not just language, opens doors polished negotiators never could. In Greenwich, her nervous system slowly learns the comfort of routine: morning runs, quiet evenings, ordinary meals, Lauren's visits. After living in survival mode, peace feels strangely unfamiliar. Some nights, a car slows outside the gate, and she still reaches for the phone. Then, little by little, she allows herself to believe that quiet can be real. Before she can fully step into her new life, Lucia needs to make peace with the old one. On a quiet Thursday evening in Queens, she stands at Carmela's granite headstone, while Alexander waits a respectful distance away. Lucia traces the cold carved letters and feels grief rise, but not only grief, strength comes with it. She is no longer the waitress counting tips after midnight. She is leading an international division with the same stubborn resilience her grandmother planted in her. Carmela never lived to see this version of her. Lucia hopes she would have understood. At the grave, Lucia remembers the night at Vittorio's, when she chose to help a bleeding stranger instead of turning away. That choice came from Carmela's lessons, from a moral inheritance stronger than fear. Now everything has changed. Alexander stands beside her as a partner, not an owner. After placing flowers on the stone, Lucia prepares for the next stop, Vittorio's itself. Alexander has bought a stake in the restaurant to remove the corruption that once ruled it. Returning there is not about nostalgia. It is about taking back the room where her old life ended. Alexander had insisted on holding the event at Vittorio's because he understood what it meant to change the meaning of a place. The restaurant where Lucia once feared for her life will now host the launch of their legitimate future. Security is still tight, because healing is not the same as pretending danger never existed. But inside, the darkness has been replaced by soft white light, flowers, and a string quartet. New York's culinary elite fills the room. When one of the owners greets Alexander as Mr. Bellini, the old world feels rewritten. When a guest calls her Lucia Grant, the name settles naturally around her. She moves through the room with ease, speaking English, Italian, and Spanish, while discussing European vintages. Alexander watches from a distance, not controlling her, simply witnessing her strength. Then Maria, a former coworker, approaches with a tray of appetizers and stops short, shocked by the woman Lucia has become. Lucia greets her warmly, without pride or embarrassment. The past is standing in front of her, and for once, she does not feel the need to hide from it. Maria studies Lucia, trying to reconcile the elegant woman before her with the exhausted waitress she remembers from 4 years earlier. When she asks about Lucia's sudden disappearance, Lucia gives the careful version, a family emergency, then work and import negotiations for Bellini Solutions. It is not the whole truth, but it is enough. She has turned a life-shattering crisis into a professional path. On the terrace, Lucia looks out at the glowing skyline and finally sees a future with shape. Then Alexander joins her with a glass of Piedmont wine. The wine is the same one Lucia secured during negotiations, and Alexander does not let her pretend that is a small thing. He understands why returning to Vittorio's feels complicated, and he does not dismiss it. He points out that even the critics are praising the venture. In just 90 days, Lucia has improved their international operations beyond expectations. Not by relying only on numbers, but by understanding people. She knows commerce is driven by pride, trust, fear, memory, and desire. Alexander once used those things as weapons. Lucia is learning to use them as bridges. Alexander's expression turns serious. He tells Lucia her position in the company was earned, not offered as decoration, not granted because she belongs to him, and not given as a safer version of captivity. Then, in front of Joseph and the senior partners, he signs the final operating authority over to her for the international division. No quiet favor, no private promise, a public transfer of power. Lucia touches the document before she touches his hand. In that order, Alexander understands how much has changed. Their embrace is quiet, without spectacle. Alexander thanks her for never pretending his past is cleaner than it is. Lucia does not romanticize what he has done, and that honesty is part of why their bond can survive. They refuse the unstable drama of people who mistake crisis for love. Lucia knows a relationship born in danger can collapse under ordinary daylight if it is built only on adrenaline. So she insists on boundaries, goals, structure, and daily choices. Love for her cannot be another emergency. For Alexander, Lucia's practical view of commitment gives him something he has rarely known: security without control. They return to the gala, stepping into a room she helped create. Deals are signed, praises exchanged, and the night unfolds smoothly. The most important moment comes near midnight, when Lucia stands alone in the quiet dining room, where she once cleared plates. The tables she used to scrub now hold the remnants of her success. Joseph notices her there and says nothing. Not need to. She has already understood. Joseph also sees the change in Alexander. He knows the risks were enormous, but his quiet approval says more than praise would. Alexander has redirected the energy that once fueled violence into the discipline of legitimate business. When the restaurant finally empties, Alexander asks Lucia if she is ready to go home. Before she answers, her phone vibrates once. No number, no message, only a photo of a silver cross ring resting on a courtroom table. The past is not gone. It is only weaker than it was. Lucia shows Alexander the photo. For a second, the old coldness returns to his face, but he does not take the phone from her. He waits. That choice matters more than any promise. Lucia studies the image, then deletes it herself. Not because she is careless, not because she believes danger has vanished, but because she refuses to let one last shadow decide the meaning of this night. They walk out as equals, leaving the battlefield behind them. Under the streetlights, Alexander kisses her like someone grateful she chose to stay. They drive away from the city toward Greenwich, toward the closest thing either of them has to a clean beginning. Manhattan blurs behind them. 4 months earlier, Lucia broke her silence in Vittorio's dining room and defied a world built to keep her obedient. That choice shattered the fragile life she knew, but it also began her becoming. Some people might misunderstand her bond with Alexander, reducing it to fear, survival, or dependence. Lucia knows the truth is more complicated. She did not choose him because he saved her. She stayed because he finally learned to let her choose herself. Sitting beside him now, Lucia understands she would make the same choice again, not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was hers. She refused the slow death of silence. She walked through fear and came out with her name still intact. Ahead, Greenwich waits in the dark. Behind her, the city fades, still dangerous, still alive. Lucia is not being hidden, carried, or protected against her will anymore. She is going home by choice. Every mafia boss story is not only about power, money, revenge, or fear. Beneath the violence and darkness, there is often a painful human lesson about choices, consequences, loyalty, family, and the price of ambition. This story reminds us that no matter how powerful a person becomes, no one can escape the truth forever. Hundreds of people, and make others tremble at the sound of his name. But if his heart is empty, his victory is never complete. The mafia boss in this story represents a man who built his life on control. He believed that fear was stronger than love, that silence was safer than honesty, and that power could protect him from pain. For years, he may have won every battle in the streets, in business, and among his enemies. But the most important battle was never outside him. It was inside his own heart. That is where he truly lost himself. One of the most meaningful lessons from this story is that power without morality becomes a prison. Many people dream of becoming rich, respected, or feared. They think success means having control over others. But real success is not measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many lives you protect, how much peace you create, and how much good remains after you are gone. The mafia boss had money, influence, and protection, but he did not have peace. His life shows us that a person can be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. Another important lesson is that loyalty is valuable, but blind loyalty can destroy lives. In the world of crime, loyalty is often treated like the highest law. People are expected to follow orders without question. Never mean giving up your conscience. A loyal person does not simply protect someone's secrets. A loyal person also has the courage to stop someone from destroying themselves. This story teaches us that loyalty without honesty is dangerous. Real loyalty should be connected to truth, respect, and moral responsibility. The story also shows the heavy cost of revenge. Revenge often feels powerful in the beginning. It gives a person the illusion that pain can be answered with pain, but revenge rarely heals anything. Instead, it creates a chain of suffering that keeps growing. One act of revenge leads to another. One betrayal leads to another. In the end, everyone loses something. The mafia boss may have believed that revenge would restore his honor, but what it truly did was steal his humanity piece by piece. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes, forgiveness is the strongest decision a person can make because it breaks the cycle of hatred. Family is another central lesson in this kind of story. Many mafia bosses claim they do everything for family. They say they commit crimes to protect the people they love. But protection without honesty can become another form of harm. A family does not only need money or security. A family needs trust, emotional safety, and love that is not poisoned by fear. If a father, husband, brother, or son becomes powerful but loses the ability to show tenderness, then his family may live in a beautiful house, but still feel trapped inside it. This story reminds us that children and loved ones often pay the price for the choices of powerful men. The mafia boss may think his decisions only affect his enemies, but every secret, every violent act, and every betrayal leaves a shadow over the innocent people around him. That is why one of the strongest educational messages is this: before making a decision, we must ask ourselves who will suffer because of it. A selfish choice may bring temporary success, but it can create long-term pain for the people we love most. Another meaningful point is the danger of pride. Pride can make a person refuse to apologize, refuse to change, and refuse to admit they are wrong. The mafia boss may have spent years believing that saying sorry would make him look weak, but in reality, the ability to apologize is a sign of strength. It takes courage to face the damage we have caused. It takes maturity to admit that we hurt someone, and it takes true character to change before it is too late. The story also teaches that redemption is possible, but it always requires sacrifice. A person cannot simply say they have changed. They must prove it through action. Redemption means accepting responsibility, protecting the innocent, telling the truth, and sometimes losing everything that was built on lies. For a mafia boss, redemption may mean walking away from power, exposing corruption, saving someone he once endangered, or choosing love over control. The path to redemption is painful, because it forces a person to confront the worst parts of themselves. But it is also the only path that can lead to peace. From a human perspective, this story is powerful because it shows that even the hardest heart can still feel pain. Behind the cold eyes of a mafia boss, there may be regret, loneliness, childhood wounds, or a deep fear of being betrayed. This does not excuse his actions, but it helps us understand that broken people often break others when they never learn how to heal. The educational value here is important. Pain should not become an excuse to hurt people. Instead, pain should become a reason to grow, to seek wisdom, and to choose a better path. For viewers, the lesson is not to admire the criminal lifestyle, but to understand its emptiness. The suits, cars, mansions, and power may look attractive from the outside, but behind them there is often fear, guilt, and loss. A life built on violence can never bring true happiness. A life built on lies can never bring true freedom. And a life built on fear can never create real love. In the end, the story of a mafia boss is really a warning. It warns us that every choice has a consequence. It warns us that money cannot buy peace. It warns us that fear cannot replace respect. It warns us that revenge cannot heal a wounded heart. Most importantly, it reminds us that the greatest power a person can have is not the power to control others, but the power to control themselves. The deepest lesson is simple but meaningful. Choose character over pride, love over control, truth over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. No matter how dark a person's past may be, change is possible when they are willing to face the truth. But the longer someone waits, the higher the price becomes. A mafia boss may win the streets, defeat his enemies, and build an empire, but if he loses his soul, he has lost everything. True strength is not found in violence. True strength is found in responsibility, compassion, humility, and the courage to become better before it is too late.